Marilyn's 34, a forensic accountant living in a small suburban house she bought with her own hard-earned money. But for years, she's been the main provider for her family, always stepping up, no matter the cost to her own life. She gave everything, from babysitting to financial support, but it came at a huge emotional toll. This is the story of how she finally broke free from the years of manipulation by her mother and sister and started taking control of her life. It's about reclaiming her own future, one bold step at a time. For as long as Marilyn could remember, she had always been the responsible one in her family. It wasn't a title she ever asked for, but one she had inherited early on. You know the type, the one that everyone turns to when things go wrong. It started small, like when her younger sister, Sophia, needed help with her kids. Marilyn, being the oldest, always stepped up. It was just part of who she was, part of the tradition they had built over the years, the one where the responsible one was always available to babysit, lend money, co-sign loans, whatever the need. She was there, ready to put her life on pause for everyone else. And this wasn't just once in a while. It was constant. If there was an emergency, Marilyn was the first phone call. If someone needed a favor, Marilyn was the one who showed up. And, at first, it didn't seem so bad. It was just the way things were, right? A tradition, something everyone accepted without a second thought. But with time, the weight of that responsibility started to take a toll. She found herself running on empty, drained in ways she couldn't quite explain. Her life, her own plans, her own goals, they were always second to whatever her mother, Elena, or Sophia needed. And it was always something: babysitting for Sophia's kids, helping with the mortgage for her mother. The list just never ended. What she didn't know at the time was that she had been caught in a cycle, one that her mother and sister had perfected over the years. Manipulation had become their game, and Marilyn, well, she was their most reliable player. Her mother, Elena, had a way of making everything sound so reasonable. Elena had worked as a bank teller years ago, and though her financial knowledge was limited, she had a certain authority about it. "Marilyn, you're so good with numbers," she would say, her voice sweet and convincing, like she was giving Marilyn a compliment. "It's only natural you'd help us out. We're family." And that word, family, it was like the key to the vault. It was the password that unlocked Marilyn's time, her energy, and yes, her money. Her mother never hesitated to remind her of it. "Family comes first," she'd say, like it was a simple truth that didn't need questioning. To Marilyn, it sounded noble, even comforting at times. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. Sophia, her younger sister, had a way of making everything about herself. At 29, 5 years younger than Marilyn, she had crafted a life that looked perfect on the surface. She was a stay-at-home mom with a growing social media following. From the outside, her life seemed flawless. Her Instagram was filled with pictures of beautifully decorated cookies, perfectly curated living rooms, and kids dressed in matching outfits. But Marilyn knew the truth. Behind the filter, behind the smile, was a very different story. Sophia was just as dependent as their mother, if not more so. It was never obvious at first. In the beginning, it was small things like paying for the kids' school supplies or helping with groceries, but soon it turned into something much bigger. Sophia had always been creative, but her career as an influencer needed more than just a good eye for photography. Marilyn, being the responsible one, was there to support. She paid for the photography classes, for the lighting equipment, for the camera gear that Sophia needed to get the perfect shot. She funded spontaneous weekend getaways that Sophia would turn into sponsored content, and those perfectly curated meals and groceries Marilyn bought them every time. It wasn't that Sophia couldn't afford it, it's that she never had to. Marilyn was always there to pick up the tab. But the most demanding part, the babysitting, the constant requests from Sophia and her husband, who claimed to work in shifts. At least, that was the story. But really, it meant there was always a reason they needed Marilyn, every weekend, every holiday, every special event. Marilyn's calendar was written in pencil because it was always up to Sophia and Alina to fill in the details. Marilyn, can you take the kids Friday night? I need to prep for a brand collaboration. Or, Marilyn, can you watch them Saturday? We have a wedding. It was never a question. It wasn't. Hey, do you think you could help out? It was a demand, an announcement of Marilyn's schedule, as though her own life didn't matter. Her protests were always met with the same rehearsed lines. But the kids love spending time with their Auntie M. Don't you want them to have a stable presence in their lives? Alina would chime in. And just like that, Marilyn was guilted into saying yes, even when she was at the end of her rope, even when she was exhausted. She couldn't say no. The weight of those words, family, responsible, help, they kept her trapped. It wasn't just about babysitting or lending money. It was about the emotional manipulation, the guilt trips. Marilyn was conditioned to say yes. The more she gave, the more they took, and the more they took, the more they expected. She had been a financial crutch for her family for years. After their father died, leaving Alina with a modest pension, it was Marilyn who stepped in. She helped pay the mortgage, cover unexpected car repairs, and even replaced the roof that Alina insisted was falling apart. Each time it was an emergency, a one-time thing, but the emergencies kept coming, and eventually they became the norm. The guilt was a constant companion, a heavy weight on Marilyn's shoulders. The emotional blackmail from her mother and sister was potent. If she said no, if she set boundaries, she risked being labeled the selfish daughter or the uncaring sister. No one wanted to be that person. Certainly not Marilyn. So she kept giving, kept sacrificing her time, her money, her peace of mind. And the deeper she went into that cycle, the more trapped she felt. But there was one person who saw it all for what it was. Ben. Marilyn's longtime friend from college was the only one who called it like it was. Ben was methodical, calm, and direct. When Marilyn vented to him about yet another canceled weekend, he didn't sugarcoat it. Marilyn, he said, sipping his coffee, a tradition is something that brings people joy and honors the past. What they're doing isn't a tradition, it's exploitation. And there it was, the truth she'd been avoiding. He was right. She knew he was right. But knowing something and acting on it are two different things. Marilyn felt trapped in a cycle she didn't know how to break. The fear of disappointing her family was always there, a looming threat. The guilt weighed heavily on her, and every time she tried to take control, she felt like she was walking on eggshells. But the truth was, she was being used. They were running the same play over and over again because she had never called foul. They knew Marilyn would always say yes. The manipulation had become so seamless that it was just the way things were. And that's when the real toll started to show. Marilyn's personal finances, the ones she tracked so meticulously at work, had become a mess. She had been willfully blind to the financial hemorrhage in her own life. Her personal finances were disorganized, a stark contrast to her professional life as a forensic accountant. Every time she added up the loans, the gifts, the bills she had covered, it felt like too much. The truth was too overwhelming. She didn't want to face it. But the real cost wasn't just financial, it was emotional. Marilyn had no social life. Her friends had stopped inviting her to events because she was always too busy. Dates, forget it. She could never commit to a weekend plan. Every weekend, every evening, was booked up with family obligations. She felt like a ghost in her own life, a person who only existed to fulfill everyone else's needs. Her home, which should have been a sanctuary, was nothing more than a revolving door of family members. It was filled with the toys that Noah and Chloe would leave behind, the lingering scent of her mother's perfume, and the weight of their expectations. The weight was crushing, and yet Marilyn kept bearing it. She was the safety net, the emergency fund, the caregiver, the responsible one. But what about her own life? What about her own needs? She was always available to everyone else, but never to herself. It was a tradition. Yes, but it was a tradition that had to end. The foundation of this family arrangement was cracking, and Marilyn knew it. She just didn't know when it would finally come crashing down. She thought it might happen when her finances reached a breaking point. She thought it might happen when she couldn't take it anymore emotionally. But what she didn't expect was for the explosion to come on New Year's Eve, the one night meant for new beginnings. That's when her family would push her too far. Not realizing she had finally finished auditing her own life, Sophia, Marilyn's younger sister, had always been able to craft a life that looked perfect from the outside. At 29, she had this seemingly flawless image that anyone could admire. She was a stay-at-home mom, taking care of her kids, Noah and Chloe, and a self-proclaimed influencer with an ever-growing following on social media. Everything about her life was curated. Every post was a picture-perfect moment of happiness and contentment. From the perfectly decorated cookies she shared on Instagram to her smiling children dressed in matching outfits. But the truth was, this perfect life came at a steep price, a price that Marilyn unknowingly paid. For years, Marilyn had been the financial backbone of Sophia's life, though it wasn't always obvious at first. It started small, with Marilyn covering groceries here and there, or helping with bills that seemed to come up unexpectedly, but it didn't stop there. As Sophia's influencer career began to grow, so did the financial demands on Marilyn. In the beginning, it was the kind of thing that Sophia made seem harmless. She'd ask Marilyn for a little help with groceries or pay for a few household things when she was a little short. Of course, Marilyn, being the ever-responsible one, stepped in without hesitation. After all, it was family. But what Marilyn didn't realize was that this small act of generosity was the beginning of something much bigger. As time went on, Sophia's requests started to increase. At first, it was about the basics. Sophia had 2 young children, after all, and maintaining a house while also trying to be an influencer wasn't easy. But what Marilyn didn't know was that these emergencies were more than just occasional asks. They were becoming regular occurrences, and each time Marilyn helped, the expectation grew. At first, it seemed like a natural extension of her role as the responsible one. After all, it was easy to justify when it was for family, and helping Sophia didn't feel like a huge sacrifice. But with each new request, Marilyn's life started to revolve more and more around Sophia's needs. Sophia's influencer career had the outward appearance of success, but the reality was that it was costly. Social media might look like it's all about snapping pictures and posting cute videos, but behind it, there's a lot of investment required equipment, photography classes, lighting setups, and of course, the seemingly endless stream of products and experiences that were needed to create content. And that's where Marilyn came in. Sophia needed a new camera to step up her content quality, and so Marilyn was there to fund it, the perfect lighting setup for her photos. That came out of Marilyn's pocket too. Every time Sophia wanted to level up her online presence, Marilyn was the one to provide the financial backing. And, of course, it wasn't just about equipment. When Sophia wanted to attend a brand collaboration event or take a spontaneous weekend getaway to gather content for her influencer feed, Marilyn was always the one there to lend a hand. She didn't hesitate. thinking it was just part of the deal, part of supporting her sister's career. The problem was that while Marilyn kept giving, Sophia kept asking. It wasn't just about funding her influencer lifestyle, though Marilyn was also the go-to for babysitting. Sophia and her husband, who worked in shifts, or so the story went, needed someone to watch the kids. And once again, Marilyn was the one who stepped up. It started with the occasional Friday night babysitting when Sophia had a brand collaboration to attend, or when she needed time to prep for a photo shoot. It felt harmless at first. Sophia would call, and Marilyn would drop whatever she was doing to take care of Noah and Chloe. But then the requests became more frequent. Marilyn, can you take the kids Friday night? I need to prep for a brand collaboration. Marilyn, can you watch them Saturday? We have a wedding. There was always something. And the requests were never framed as questions, they were demands. You'll do this, right? Was the unspoken assumption. Marilyn never wanted to disappoint. She had always prided herself on being reliable, on being the one her family could count on. So she said yes, time and time again, sacrificing her weekends, her evenings, and often her own plans. The guilt came quickly if she hesitated or tried to make excuses, but the kids loved spending time with Auntie M. Sophia would chirp, as if that was supposed to make everything okay. Don't you want them to have a stable presence in their lives? Alina, their mother, would add, the words dripping with guilt. It was like clockwork. No matter how overwhelmed Marilyn felt, no matter how drained she was, the pressure from her family was constant. Sophia had the perfect way of making Marilyn feel like she was the one who was being selfish for not jumping to help. The manipulation was subtle, but effective. Marilyn felt trapped, like she couldn't say no without being painted as the bad guy, the one who didn't care. Sophia's sense of entitlement grew over time. The requests came more frequently, and the reasons became more elaborate. Marilyn, can you watch the kids? I have a networking event for my brand. Marilyn, can you take them Saturday? I have a girls' trip planned. It wasn't just about needing help anymore. It was about Sophia's desire to live a life she couldn't afford. And Marilyn was the one footing the bill. Marilyn's weekends, her vacations, even her free time, everything was on hold because Sophia needed her. And it wasn't just Sophia. Alina was just as quick to call upon Marilyn whenever she had an emergency. After their father passed away, Alina had relied heavily on Marilyn for financial support, especially when it came to the mortgage. Marilyn helped pay bills, fixed things around the house, and kept Alina's life afloat when it seemed like everything was falling apart. It was supposed to be temporary, just a few emergencies here and there, but the emergencies never stopped. Alina's financial struggles were a constant presence in Marilyn's life, and they kept getting worse. Each time Marilyn helped, Alina promised it would be the last time, but it never was. It was a vicious cycle that kept repeating itself. Marilyn found herself living in a state of constant exhaustion. Her life revolved around fulfilling the needs of others, mostly her mother and sister. They had become the center of her world, and her own dreams, her own desires, were pushed to the side. Marilyn had been trained, in a sense, to be the one who always said yes. And with each yes, her resentment grew. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the time she was sacrificing. It was about the emotional toll. She was losing herself in a never-ending game of putting others first. And every time she tried to take a step back, she was met with guilt and emotional manipulation. Sophia's requests reached new heights. It wasn't just about babysitting anymore. It was about a lifestyle, one that Marilyn was funding but had no part in. It was a life built on the sacrifices Marilyn made, and she wasn't even aware of how deep she was sinking into this role until it was too late. Sophia would make it sound like the perfect, easygoing life, but behind the facade was a long list of things Marilyn had paid for. She had helped Sophia get her start as an influencer. She had funded trips, equipment, clothing, and groceries. Every time Sophia posted a picture of a perfect family vacation or a perfectly styled meal, Marilyn knew she had made it possible. And as the requests grew, so did Marilyn's resentment, but she was stuck. How do you say no to family, especially when you're conditioned to be the one who's always there? As Sophia's demands became more frequent, Marilyn started to feel like she had no life of her own. Her weekends were filled with babysitting, her finances were drained, and she was emotionally exhausted. It was as if Sophia had built her entire life on the back of Marilyn's sacrifices. Marilyn's role in the family had become clear. She was the one who gave, the one who helped, the one who made everything possible. But the more she gave, the more her own life slipped away from her. It was only when she looked around and realized she had nothing left for herself that the reality hit. She was trapped in a cycle, and the only way out was to break free from the demands of her family. It was New Year's Eve, the night everyone was supposed to be ready for new beginnings, fresh starts, and all that jazz. But for Marilyn, it was just another night of being pulled in a million directions. For once, she had made plans for herself. Ben, her longtime friend, had invited her to a small gathering at his house. It wasn't anything fancy, just a few friends, board games, and a clear view of the city's fireworks from his balcony. The kind of night Marilyn had always dreamed of having. The kind of night she could never seem to make time for because, well, her family always seemed to need something. But this year was different. She had made up her mind that she wouldn't let her family's expectations steal her night away. She had made plans weeks in advance. The excitement had built up, and she was cautiously optimistic. She would finally enjoy a New Year's Eve that was just for her. However, things quickly took a turn. The air in her mother's house felt thick with the weight of unspoken expectations. Marilyn had been dropping off some financial documents that her mother, Elina, had asked her to review for taxes, another unpaid task on her already long list. As Marilyn entered, she was greeted by the familiar scent of pine from the dying Christmas tree and the overwhelming sweetness of holiday potpourri. It felt suffocating. Sophia, her younger sister, was there too, sitting in the armchair, scrolling through her phone. Noah and Chloe, her niece and nephew, were running around the living room, their new Christmas toys already looking worn. The chaos of children was a soundtrack Marilyn had grown used to. She loved them dearly, but she had longed for a peaceful evening. She glanced at the clock just a few hours before the evening would begin. She had to go home, get dressed, and get to Ben's house. But as usual, things didn't go according to plan. Elina, who was flipping through a TV guide, didn't even look up when she addressed Marilyn. "Marilyn, darling, just to confirm, you'll be at your house around 7 tonight to get the kids." Alina's tone was casual, almost absent, but the words were as heavy as a stone. It wasn't a question, it was an assumption, an expectation, one she had every right to make in her mind. Marilyn's heart did that familiar flip-flop of anxiety. Her plans for the night were hanging by a thread. She was already feeling the pull, the guilt creeping in, as it always did when her family needed her. "Actually, Mom, I can't tonight. I have plans," Marilyn said, trying to sound confident, but her voice wavered slightly. The silence that followed was like a slap to her face. Elina slowly lowered the TV guide and looked at Marilyn with a raised eyebrow, disbelief written all over her face. Sophia, who had been scrolling through her phone, looked up, a smirk tugging at the corners of her lips. It was their game, and Marilyn had just broken the rules. "Plans," Elina repeated, her voice colder now. "What kind of plans?" She seemed genuinely confused, like the idea of Marilyn having her own life was a foreign concept. "No one told me you had plans." Marilyn took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I'm going to a friend's house for New Year's," she said, her voice more firm than before. "I made these plans weeks ago." The reaction was instant. Sophia, who had been quiet until now, let out a sharp scoff. It was the kind of sound that could freeze anyone in their tracks. "A friend's house?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Marilyn, it's New Year's Eve. It's a night for family." She waved vaguely towards the kids, as if they were the reason Marilyn should cancel her own plans. "We have plans. We're going to the annual gala at the country club. I have a new dress. It's important for my brand." "Your brand?" Marilyn asked, unable to keep the incredulity out of her voice. Sophia's defensive tone only sharpened. "Yes, my brand. Networking is work. Marilyn, you wouldn't understand." She said it with such finality, like Marilyn had no place in this conversation anymore. Alina, always the master of emotional manipulation, chimed in then. "Your sister needs a night off," she said, her voice slipping into that tone of fake sweetness that Marilyn knew all too well. "She works so hard with the children. Your father and I used to go to that gala every year. It's sentimental for me." The guilt was thick now, smothering Marilyn. Her mind raced. She had been pushed into a corner before, but this time, the words felt like daggers. Alina had mastered the art of playing the grieving widow, and Sophia, with her carefully crafted persona of a busy influencer, was the perfect foil. Marilyn had always been the one to give, always the one to show up. But now, for the first time, she wasn't sure if she could continue doing this. She tried to hold her ground. "I understand that, Mom, but I also need a night off. I work hard too. I made these plans weeks ago. I can't just cancel." Her voice was steady, though the internal battle raged inside her. She had every right to go, to enjoy a peaceful evening without the weight of their demands. But then, like clockwork, the final move came. Sophia, always quick with a way to manipulate Marilyn's emotions, flashed a saccharine smile. She turned to Noah, who had been playing with a toy truck on the floor, and asked him in a sweet, sing-song voice, "Noah, sweetie, who are you having a sleepover with tonight for New Year's?" Noah, as innocent as ever, looked up with wide eyes. "Auntie M," he shouted excitedly. "We're going to watch the fireworks and eat popcorn." Sophia's smirk widened as she looked at Marilyn, the triumph clear in her eyes. "We already told them, Marilyn," she said softly, her voice laced with venom. "They've been looking forward to it all week. You wouldn't want to disappoint them, would you?" And just like that, Marilyn's resolve began to crumble. The look in Noah's eyes, the way he spoke about their special evening, it hit Marilyn harder than she wanted to admit. The guilt was unbearable. She had spent so many years sacrificing for and now, the children, the innocent faces, were being used as pawns in a game of emotional blackmail. Chloe, who had been silent up until then, spoke up in a small, wobbly voice. "Auntie M, why don't you want to play with us?" Her words were simple, but they cut through Marilyn like a knife. She looked at their expectant faces and felt the weight of their manipulation. This wasn't about a fun night for the kids. This was about control, about making sure Marilyn would comply with their expectations, no matter what. Marilyn could feel the walls closing in around her. Every fiber of her being screamed to say no, to stand up for herself, to finally put her foot down. But the emotional pressure from her mother and sister was too much. The guilt, the sense of obligation, the fear of being labeled the selfish daughter. It all came crashing down on her. She couldn't say no, not to her mother, not to her sister, not to the kids. The words escaped her in a soft, defeated nod. It was all they needed. "Wonderful," Alina declared, clapping her hands together as though everything had been resolved. She picked up the TV guide again, the conversation over. 7 o'clock then. Don't be late. Sophia went back to her phone, already composing a post about her New Year's Eve plans. It was over. Marilyn's night, her plans, her attempt to have a life outside of her family. It was all dismissed with a single gesture. Marilyn walked out of her mother's house feeling like she had been hollowed out. The cold December air hit her face, but it didn't do anything to cool the rage and helplessness burning inside her. She sat in her car for a long time, the engine off, replaying the scene in her mind. The guilt, the manipulation, the pressure, the emotional cost of constantly saying yes. The worst part was that she hadn't even fought for herself. She had given in once again. But this time, something inside her began to shift. As she drove home in a daze, she texted Ben, apologizing for canceling. He responded almost immediately. Marilyn, no, call me. But Marilyn didn't call. She couldn't bear to hear the disappointment in his voice, or worse, the "I told you so" that she knew would be there, even if he didn't say it. The guilt, the shame, it was overwhelming. She was 34 years old, a successful professional managing multi-million-dollar accounts. But in that moment, she felt utterly powerless. She was still that little girl trying to meet her family's impossible expectations. The night dragged on, and Marilyn kept replaying that single, silent nod. That nod wasn't just a defeat. It was the culmination of years of giving in, of canceling plans, of putting everyone else's happiness above her own. And that nod, though it felt like surrender at the time, was the beginning of something else. It was the beginning of her realizing that she couldn't live like this anymore. After that final crushing blow on New Year's Eve, when Marilyn realized just how far her family had pushed her, something inside her snapped. She felt like she had been living in a fog for years, allowing her mother and sister to manipulate her, using the guise of family to get what they wanted. But that night, something changed. She had been giving and giving, her time, her energy, her money, and now she had nothing left for herself. But what really hit her hard was the realization that it wasn't just her time and energy she had been bleeding, it was her finances. She had given so much that she had no idea just how much it all added up to. As a forensic accountant, Marilyn had spent years unraveling financial webs, investigating fraud, and tracking down hidden assets. She was skilled at looking at the big picture, finding the connections and patterns others missed. But for years, she had turned a blind eye to her own financial situation. She had been so focused on the needs of her family, on keeping up with the constant stream of requests, that she had never stopped to take a look at the bigger picture. But now, after that night, she knew something had to change. It wasn't enough to just keep helping. It wasn't enough to keep being the reliable one who bailed them out whenever they needed it. She had to know exactly what was going on with her finances. And for once, she had to put herself first. She had to take control of her life, of her money, and that meant auditing everything. Marilyn went into her home office the next morning, her mind already working as she walked through the door. It was a familiar space, usually reserved for her clients' complex problems. She was used to using her skills to dig into other people's finances, finding hidden assets, or uncovering fraud. But this time, the audit would be personal. She pulled up her bank statements, her credit card bills, and every digital transaction she could find, going back 5 years. The weight of it all felt overwhelming, but she knew this was the only way to get the full picture. She started with a new spreadsheet. It felt cold and unforgiving, but it was exactly what she needed. She labeled 3 columns Elena, Sophia, and Sophia's family. As she went through the records, the numbers started to pile up, and with each entry, Marilyn could feel the weight of her past decisions pressing down on her. It started with the small things, groceries, bills, loans, but as she went deeper, it became clear just how much she had been giving. There were the hundreds of transfers to her mother, Elena, each one, seemingly a small gesture, added up to staggering amounts over the years. For groceries or to help with bills was the memo, and every time, Marilyn thought she was helping, keeping her mother afloat. But as the numbers grew, she started to see a pattern. There was no end. It was one emergency after another, and every time, Marilyn was there, giving her last dollar to make sure her mother was okay. But now, looking at the spreadsheet, she could see the truth. These were not emergencies. These were demands, and they had been going on for years. Sophia's column grew just as quickly. Marilyn had always known that Sophia was financially dependent on her, but seeing it laid out in front of her was a different story. There were loans for Sophia's influencer career, new cameras, lighting equipment, photography classes, all paid for by Marilyn, the brand collaborations, the spontaneous weekend getaways, the emergencies for clothes or groceries. Marilyn had funded it all. And then there were the more personal loans, helping with kids' extracurricular activities, ballet classes for Chloe, soccer camp for Noah, the bills that were supposedly too much for Sophia to handle, that Marilyn had taken care of. The guilt that had been buried deep inside her started to rise up. How had she not seen this before? How had she allowed herself to be caught up in this web of lies and manipulation? The numbers on the page were a testament to her own weakness, her inability to must know, her fear of being labeled selfish. But as the realization hit her, something else started to shift inside Marilyn. The anger that had been simmering for years began to boil over. She had been played. All those years, all those sacrifices, they had been for nothing. And now, she was finally seeing the truth. The most crushing discovery came when Marilyn pulled up the records for a loan she had given to Sophia years ago. Sophia had asked for money to fix a burst pipe, and Marilyn had sent the funds without question. The memo on the transfer read, "Emergency plumber," and Marilyn had believed the story. But as she dug deeper into the records, she found something else, another charge for a lavish dinner at a high-end restaurant. The gilded spoon on the very same day. The bill, over $400 for a dinner for two, was outrageous. But it wasn't the cost that stung the most. It was the date. The dinner had been on Marilyn's birthday. Marilyn had been tricked into babysitting, thinking her sister was sick. She had canceled plans with Ben, spent the night watching cartoons and eating macaroni and cheese with Noah and Chloe, while her sister and mother had dined on lobster and champagne. The realization hit Marilyn like a physical blow. They had used her. They had manipulated her into thinking she was helping, all while living a life funded by her. The fraud was clear now. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. Marilyn's hands shook as she typed out the numbers on the spreadsheet, each one a revelation. She had been funding Sophia's entire lifestyle, funding a lie. Every emergency request for money, every time she had been asked for help, had been part of a larger scheme. And it wasn't just Sophia. Elena had been doing the same thing, hiding her own financial stability while continuing to accept Marilyn's help. As the anger and betrayal washed over her, Marilyn's mind raced. She had to keep going. She couldn't stop now. She needed to know the full extent of the damage. She pulled up the records for the supplementary credit card she had given to Sophia years ago, a small limit for emergencies only. But as Marilyn reviewed the statements, she found charge after charge, spa days, hotel bookings for weekend getaways, and luxury purchases Sophia had no business making. These were the things Marilyn hadn't known about. These were the secrets her family had kept from her. Marilyn's professional instincts kicked in. This wasn't just about her sister's poor decisions. This was fraud. She had been taken advantage of, manipulated into funding a lifestyle she never signed up for. Her family had used her, and now she was going to expose it. She didn't just need to track the money, she needed to reclaim what was hers. As she worked through the records, the numbers grew more staggering. By the time she finished, Marilyn realized she had been drained of over 6 figures, a sum that could have been invested in her future, could have bought her a house, could have been her freedom. Instead, it had been poured into a black hole of lies and deception. The realization was overwhelming. She had spent years living for others, and in the process, she had lost herself. But now, with the spreadsheet in front of her, Marilyn felt something new: clarity. She could see it all: the lies, the manipulation, the way her family had treated her as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. And for the first time in years, she knew exactly what she needed to do. She was going to take control. She wasn't going to be the victim anymore. She was going to reclaim her money, her time, and her life. As Marilyn continued sifting through the endless pile of transactions, each one more damning than the last, she felt a growing sense of dread, like she was slowly piecing together a puzzle she had been blind to for years. But then, as she dug through a box of old receipts she had kept for tax purposes, something caught her eye. It was a small, crumpled piece of thermal paper, the kind you get from a restaurant receipt. The date printed on it was from just over a year ago, and as she pulled it out, she realized it was from the Gilded Spoon, a high-end restaurant in the city. Her stomach twisted. She didn't remember ever going there. Marilyn stared at the total: over $400 for a dinner for two. The price alone sent a shockwave through her body. But it was the date that made her heart skip a beat. It was her birthday. The day she had canceled plans with Ben to babysit Noah and Chloe. The day she had stayed home, thinking her sister, Sophia, was too sick to go out and had needed her help. The memory of that night came rushing back. Marilyn had wanted to do something simple, maybe a quiet dinner with Ben, but Sophia had called in a panic, claiming her husband had to work late and that she was too sick to watch the kids. Marilyn, as always, had dropped everything to help, leaving behind her own plans to be there for her family. Now, looking at the receipt, Marilyn's blood ran cold. She had been played. They had lied to her. She remembered that night clearly. She had spent it alone, watching cartoons with her niece and nephew, eating macaroni and cheese while her sister and mother had been dining at a luxury restaurant, enjoying oysters, lobster, and champagne. Marilyn had believed every word they told her. They had crafted the perfect excuse, wrapped in a lie. Her fingers trembled as she picked up her credit card statement for that month. There it was, the charge for $423.50 at the Gilded Spoon. But what shocked her even more was the transaction that followed it. A mobile payment to Sophia, just hours earlier, for $500 with the memo, "Emergency plumber." Marilyn had sent that money without question, believing it was an urgent request for help, a story about a burst pipe in Sophia's kitchen. But now, everything clicked into place. Sophia had made up a fake emergency, a fabricated crisis, to manipulate Marilyn into sending her money so that she could fund her lavish dinner with Alina. They had eaten and celebrated while Marilyn had been stuck at home, fulfilling her role as the ever-reliable babysitter. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. They hadn't just used her. They had exploited her kindness, her generosity, and her love. The anger that had been simmering inside her exploded. It was one thing to be asked for money. It was another thing entirely to be lied to be treated like a fool, to be taken for granted. But this wasn't just about a dinner. This was about everything: the years of manipulation, the endless cycle of requests for help, the emotional blackmail disguised as family duty. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal. Marilyn's mind raced. She had been blind to all of this for so long. How could she have been so naive? She had given and given, all while they had been living a double life. Sophia had used her, but so had Alina. She had been helping her mother with her mortgage, sending money to cover unexpected expenses, thinking she was keeping her afloat. But as Marilyn dug deeper, she realized the truth. Alina's mortgage had been fully paid off months ago, using an inheritance from a distant aunt. Yet, she had never told Marilyn, never even mentioned it. Instead, she had kept accepting Marilyn's help, pocketing the money for herself. It wasn't just her sister's lies that hurt, it was her mother's betrayal. Alina had painted herself as a struggling widow, always in need of help. But the truth was darker. She had used Marilyn's generosity to fuel her own habits. Marilyn's eyes burned as she processed the new revelation. The money she had been giving her mother had been funding her trips to the casino, her indulgences, her hidden lifestyle. She had been enabling her mother's addiction while thinking she was helping. The entire web of deceit was unraveling, and Marilyn could feel her grip on reality slipping. She had been living in a haze, caught in the grip of guilt and obligation, convinced that family came first, that her love was measured in dollars. But now, as she looked at the numbers in front of her, she realized that she had been trapped in a cycle of financial and emotional manipulation. She had been living for them, sacrificing herself to keep them comfortable, all while they had been living a life of lies. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind moving quickly as the weight of her discoveries settled in. The spreadsheet in front of her was no longer just a record of transactions. It was evidence, proof of the betrayal. Every number, every entry, was a snapshot of the years she had spent building a life for others, only to have it all taken from her. The thought made her sick to her stomach. But something else started to grow inside her resolve. She was no longer going to be a victim of their lies. She wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. Marilyn had spent years investigating other people's financial secrets, uncovering fraud, and solving mysteries. But now, the mystery was her own, and she was going to solve it. She had spent years ignoring the red flags, telling herself that family needed her, that she was doing the right thing by helping. But now, she saw the truth. Her family wasn't in need. They were greedy. They had used her, and now she was done. The first step was to reclaim her life, to take back control. Marilyn knew she couldn't undo the years of giving, but she could change the future. She wasn't going to be their financial crutch anymore. She wasn't going to be their emotional doormat. She had spent too long letting them take from her without ever asking for anything in return. It was time to put an end to it. And the first step in that process was to make sure they understood just how deep their manipulation had run, with cold, steely resolve. Marilyn picked up the pen and began writing. She wasn't going to give them another chance to hurt her. She wasn't going to keep allowing them to take from her. She had finally found the courage to stand up for herself. And that meant cutting ties, severing the financial and emotional connection she had been feeding for so long. This wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about taking back her life. For the first time in years, Marilyn knew exactly what she had to do, and she wasn't going to let anyone stand in her way. The discovery of the fraud, the lies, and the emotional manipulation had ignited something inside Marilyn. She had spent too many years accommodating her family's every need, sacrificing her own well-being, both emotionally and financially. But now, she knew it was time to stop. No more. She couldn't go on being the fall guy, the endless resource, the safety net for people who took her generosity for granted. It was time to protect herself. She wasn't just going to stop giving. They needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal. That evening, as the weight of her decision settled in, Marilyn walked into her home office, where her computer sat glowing, a cold reminder of the vast financial web she'd been trapped in for years. She didn't hesitate this time. She knew what she needed to do. First, she logged into her online banking, the joint savings account she had opened with her mother years ago, thinking she was helping Elena manage her bills, was the first to go. For years, Marilyn had been the sole contributor to that account, thinking it was a safety net for her mother. But the truth was, Elena didn't need a safety net, she needed to be held accountable. Marilyn transferred every penny, a significant 5-figure sum, into a new account at a bank Elena had no knowledge of. Then, with a firm click, she initiated the process to have her mother's name removed and the account closed entirely. Next, Marilyn turned her attention to the supplementary credit card that she had given Sophia. A small limit, meant for emergencies only, had been abused for years. Marilyn had allowed her sister to use it, trusting that it was a lifeline for true emergencies. But now, it had become another tool in the manipulation. She went through the transactions one last time, noting the endless charges for spa days, luxury shopping, and weekend getaways, things that had nothing to do with emergencies. Without a second thought, Marilyn clicked the button to report the card as lost or stolen. It was immediately deactivated, and she requested a replacement card, but only sent it to her primary address. Sophia's access to her financial resources, at least the one tied directly to Marilyn, was severed. Marilyn's hands were steady as she made each decision. The numbers in her bank account were no longer just numbers. They were the last remnants of her old life, the one where she had let her family drain her, emotionally and financially. And now, she was taking it all back. But this wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming her autonomy, her sense of self, and her right to live without guilt or fear of manipulation. After closing the accounts, Marilyn felt a rush of clarity. But there was one more step to take, something that would mark the final act of severance. She walked into her living room, grabbed a piece of thick, cream-colored cardstock from her desk, the kind she used for formal correspondence. She wasn't going to do this with a hasty email or a text message. No, this was something that had to be real, something they couldn't ignore. She picked up her black fountain pen, its ink permanent and bold against the page. Each letter she wrote was deliberate, steady. It was a statement of her newfound resolve. She didn't need to explain herself anymore. The letter was simple, but every word carried the weight of the years she had spent trapped in their expectations. She had already edited it in her mind a dozen times, stripping away any emotion or justification. It was a clean break, no room for discussion, no space for manipulation. It read, "Alina and Sophia, the arrangement we have had is over, effective immediately. I will no longer be providing any financial support, babysitting services, or any other form of assistance. Your access to my financial accounts has been permanently revoked. I suggest you check your own financial situations and make arrangements accordingly. Do not contact me. I will reach out if and when I am ready. Any attempt to show up at my home or workplace will be viewed as harassment. This is not a discussion. It is a notification. Marilyn." Reading the letter back, Marilyn felt a cold sense of clarity. It was almost brutal in its finality. But that was exactly the point. This wasn't about her family's feelings anymore. This was about her survival. Every word was chosen carefully, with a firm intent to set boundaries that could never be crossed again. The words harassment and notification weren't just terms of business. They were her way of showing that the personal relationship they had tried to keep her in was over. She was done being their emotional and financial doormat. After writing the letter, Marilyn knew what had to come next. She made a copy of her spreadsheet, the one that detailed every dollar, every lie, every betrayal. She printed a summary page showing the grand total and amount so large that at first glance, it almost looked like a mistake. But it wasn't. It was the cold, hard truth. She folded this summary into a separate envelope, tucking it away alongside the formal letter. This was her evidence, the silent justification for her actions. With everything in place, Marilyn walked to the front door of her house. Her heart was pounding in her chest, a nervous rhythm that echoed the weight of what she was about to do. This was the point of no return. She took a deep breath and, with a steady hand, secured the letter to the center of the door with packing tape. It was impossible to miss. Positioned right at eye level, anyone who came to her door that night would have no choice but to see it. Then, with the letter in place, Marilyn turned her attention to the second envelope, the one containing the financial summary. She had already looked up the address of the country club hosting the New Year's Eve gala. She knew that Alina and Sophia would be there, pretending everything was normal, enjoying the night that Marilyn had sacrificed so much for. She had arranged for a courier to deliver the envelope directly to her mother at the club between 9 o'clock and 9:30 p.m. She wanted them to receive the truth in the midst of their celebration, to shatter the illusion of their perfect night. The courier would hand over the envelope directly to Alina, and that would be the moment they realized everything had changed. Marilyn went back inside and locked the door behind her. She drew the curtains, turned off all the lights except for a single lamp in the living room. She put her phone on silent and placed it face down on the coffee table. She didn't want to hear it ring. She didn't want to see their names flash across the screen. She made herself a cup of tea and sat down on the sofa. The silence in the house was profound, the kind of quiet that felt both unsettling and liberating at the same time. Marilyn stared at the walls, the weight of her decision sinking in. This was it. She had taken the final step. No more games. No more manipulation. She had severed the ties, and she was free. But even as she sat there, a part of her couldn't help but think about Noah and Chloe. The thought of them, innocent and unaware, tugged at her heart. She loved them, and the thought of disappointing them, of not being there for them, hurt more than she cared to admit. But she knew, deep down, that this was the only way. She couldn't continue living this way, trapped in their demands and guilt. She had to choose herself for once. As the minutes passed, the quiet became more profound, and with it, Marilyn's resolve hardened. She had done the right thing. This was the first step toward reclaiming her life. The road ahead would be difficult, but she knew she was stronger now. The battle was over. She had won, and she was free. As the weeks passed, Marilyn began to feel the weight of years of emotional burden slowly lift off her shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she could breathe freely. The constant pressure, the endless demands, the guilt, everything that had been so ingrained in her life was gone. She had taken control, made the hard decisions, and cut the ties that had kept her tethered to a life of manipulation and self-sacrifice. Marilyn had taken legal steps to protect herself, consulting with a sharp family lawyer who helped her navigate the complexities of severing her financial ties with her family. The partition action on her mother's house had gone through, and with the money she recovered, she bought herself a beautiful new condo. The weight of her old life, the one filled with guilt and expectation, was replaced with something new: peace, independence, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had made the right choice. She no longer felt the need to answer every call, to be at the beck and call of her mother and sister, or to be the financial crutch they had relied on for so long. She was free to make her own decisions, to live her life on her own terms, without the constant shadow of obligation hanging over her. As Marilyn looked out of the window of her new home, the city lights below twinkling in the distance, she couldn't help but feel proud that she had found the strength to stand up for herself, to put up the boundaries that had been so long overdue. She had taken back her life, her finances, and, most importantly, her peace of mind. But even as she settled into her new life, Marilyn couldn't help but think about the lessons she'd learned. She had been taught for years to put others before herself, to always be there for family, no matter the cost. But she now knew that boundaries weren't just something to be respected by others, they were something she had to set for herself. She couldn't help but wonder how many others were stuck in similar situations, feeling obligated to give, to sacrifice, to constantly be there for people who never asked if they were okay. Marilyn's journey had been painful, but it had led her to a place of freedom that she never thought possible. And as she reflected on everything she had been through, she wanted to share one simple thought with the world. It's okay to put yourself first. It's okay to say no. It's okay to create boundaries, even with the people you love. Because if you don't protect your own heart and soul, who will? If Marilyn's story has resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own life. Are there relationships, whether with family or friends, that are draining you emotionally or financially? Have you set the boundaries you need to protect your own well-being? If you're interested in hearing more stories of transformation, of finding strength in the face of adversity, and learning how to take control of your life, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. You deserve the freedom to live on your own terms, just like Marilyn. Thanks for watching, and take care of yourself. Your story is just beginning.